So we're moving on to the second sessions on emissions-free supply chains, and this will focus on tackling pharmaceuticals. So a recent article written by one of today's speakers, Dr. Josep Guyu Segura, showed that although medicine accounts for 25% of emissions within the healthcare system, a small number of medicines account for a large portion of the emissions. Currently, the focus is largely on two of such groups: anesthetic gases, 2% of emissions, and inhalers, 3% of emissions, where emission occur at the point of use. And so we will have a presentation about that. Then the remaining 20% of emissions are primarily found in the manufacturing and fried inherent in the supply chain. So as there are many components to the emission chain in healthcare, even within pharmaceutical, our two guest speakers today will help us explore how hospitals can address the carbon footprint of pharmaceuticals and why this is crucial for mitigating climate change and protecting public health. After the session, there will be again a short Q&A. And if we don't have time to answer all the questions, the speakers are also encouraged to answer them in the break or reception after the summit. So we'll introduce our speakers, Francesco Barone and Dr. Josep Maria Guyu Segura. Dr. Josep is the Director of Pharmacy and Medicines at the Consortium of Health and Social Care of Catalonia and adjunct lecturer of clinical pharmacy and pharmacotherapy at the Faculty of Pharmacy and Food Sciences at the University of Barcelona, Spain. He's also currently Secretary of the Catalan Society of Clinical Pharmacy and Vice President for the Euro region of Hospital Pharmacy Section of International Pharmaceutical Federation. Francesco is currently an Associate Professor of Public Health at the Università del Piemonte Orientale in Novara, Italy, and faculty of the Joint International Doctoral Program in Global Health, Humanitarian Aid, Disaster Medicine in Brussels. His research interests include global health, disaster epidemiology, occupational and environmental epidemiology, statistical methods for epidemiology, and public health. His research has been awarded by the US National Institute of Health and European Society of Cardiology. So I'll first welcome Francesco on stage, and then I'll manage the other speaker. But first, it's your presentation, Francesco. Okay, you have a clicker. Welcome.
I will keep my clock just to be sure not to go. Okay, so oh, thank you. Okay, perfect. Okay, we can start. Thank you very much for inviting me for giving me the possibility to speak today. As we all know, pharmaceuticals account for about 25% of the total amount of emissions produced by the healthcare systems. And I will talk today briefly about anesthetics gas. So in high-income countries, the most used types of general anesthetics are nitrous oxide and halogenated anesthetics. They are all very powerful greenhouse gases. You can see the GWP is the global warming potential. You can see that all of them are basically much more powerful than CO2. And in particular, desflurane is almost 3,000 times more powerful than CO2. Now, the interesting thing is that basically desflurane and sevoflurane have a very similar use, very similar risk-benefit profile and so on, but they have very different climate impact. There is basically a 20 times difference between these two gases. And so in the last years, there was different calls to try to reduce the use of desflurane because we already have different options. One is desflurane and others are, for example, the intravenous anesthesia and so on. So in 2022, there was some guidelines were issued by the World Federation of the Societies of Anesthesiologists, encouraging the substitution of desflurane, or at least its reduction. And early this year, Scotland was the first country in the world to ban desflurane. And England, as you probably know, will follow the next year. At the same time, in this very moment, the European Commission in this year is discussing whether banning desflurane in all the European Union from 2026 onwards. So this is a very hot topic right now. However, it's still not completely clear what proportion of the overall carbon footprints of halogenated anesthetics can be specifically attributed to the use of desflurane. Why? Because the models that are usually adopted make a lot of assumption about they don't really use the quantities, the real quantities of anesthetics, but they make assumption, for example, basing on the number of surgeries and so on. So for this reason, we started a collaboration with the Italian Medicine Agency to use the official drug consumption data that are collected by the agency on a routinary basis, and to use this data to calculate the greenhouse gas emissions associated with the use of the different anesthetics. And we conducted this analysis at the country level for the first time in Italy, and at the regional level. Now, I don't know if you are all probably not familiar with the messy healthcare system in Italy, but basically we have 20 regions that are very almost independent for healthcare issues. So basically they work as 20 independent healthcare systems. So we were very interested also to see whether they were different between the regions in the use of these anesthetics. We, about 1 month ago, we published this data in a leading journal of anesthesia. And we found, basically what we found is that even if sevoflurane is still the most used halogenated agent in Italy, in fact, desflurane grew a lot in the last 10 years. And now, if you move from the left panel to the right panel, the ones that show the emissions associated with these gases, you see that basically desflurane account for more than 90% of the total emissions associated with halogenated agents. So basically, desflurane is the driver of the big driver of the emissions in Italy. What is really even more surprising is that if you go to see what the different regions do, well, it seems that each region is really telling a different story. There is basically a more than 20 times difference in the use of desflurane, and so in the emissions, associated emissions among the different regions. So it's so the worst region is, just to repeat it, the worst region is using 20 times more desflurane than the best region in Italy. Okay, so this doesn't have any clinical rational explanation. It's just a sort of a haphazard process, basically. And you can see this even better if you go to see the differences in the changes over time in the last 5 years. The arrows show the changes in emissions in the different regions between 2016 and 2021. And you can see that some regions increase a lot, some other just cut the use of desflurane, some others remain the same. This is just a chaotic process, unregulated. Even the good regions didn't do that because they were aware of the problems related with desflurane. This was just something completely unrelated to this. This discussion is not very common in Italy, so I can tell that probably there was not such discussion even among the best regions. It was probably something related with economic reason, or maybe the choices of anesthesiologists and so on. Now, how this data compare with data from other countries? Well, it's not easy to do that because we don't have much data from other countries. But let's try to make some comparison. This is Denmark and Italy. In 2009, they were basically using the same amount of desflurane. I'm now here showing the emissions, but basically desflurane is the driver, the main driver. So it's the same to talk about amount of desflurane used and emissions, associated emissions. In 2009, they were doing basically the same. Then Denmark started to cut the use of desflurane, while Italy started to increase the use of desflurane. Who knows why? Probably. And then we have data from Scotland. Scotland was doing very bad before starting thinking about desflurane. It was much worse than Italy, but then it shows that you can go on the right path if you like. So it just catch up with Denmark, and at the same time Italy was going up. What do we know from other countries? We have some single published data, so it's difficult to make to make guesses about the time trends. But apparently Sweden was doing in the same way, in a similar way than Denmark. This makes sense, probably. And England and Ireland, we don't know exactly because we don't have the changes, but it seems that they are doing in some way, in the same way as Scotland, even if it would be very nice to have some data. But the most important information in this slide is what we don't have. Where are Germany, France, Spain, Poland, all the other countries? We just don't know. Are they doing good as Denmark and Scotland, or are they doing like Italy? We just don't know. And this is crazy because, in fact, the data that we use in Italy for make our calculation are routinely collected data that the agency, the medicine agency, the National Medicine Agency, just collect for other purposes. And I'm pretty sure that most of the European countries do have this data. So it would be very important, and this could be maybe like a proposal or, I don't know, a challenge for Healthcare Without Arms, to try to push countries to make this data public, because in this way we can try to understand in which direction we are going, especially now that this discussion is taken at the level of the European Commission. So let me go to my final slide. So what we found in our study is that desflurane played definitely a major role in greenhouse gas emissions related to halogenated agents, at least in Italy, but I suspect also in other countries, unless the ones that decided to cut desflurane. We found a completely crazy variation among of usage among the Italian regions that is not justifiable in any way, and that means that all the recommendation that has been made by this scientific society has not been really implemented in Italy. This also means that there is room for a substantial reduction in the use of desflurane while still delivering high quality care. The regions, basically the quality of care in the different regions are, roughly speaking, the same. So there's no reason why you should use 20 times more desflurane to do the same number of surgical operation with the same quality and so on. And finally, I want to reemphasize this topic. I think we desperately need public data on the use of these anesthetics to try to track improvement or wrong paths as the ones that has been taken by Italy. If we want to control something, we need first to measure it. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you, Francesco. So in the sake of timekeeping, I will move to the next speakers, but keep your questions for Francesco, so we can then open the floor for Q&A at the session. So yeah, I invite you, please, Dr. Yusuf.
Well, thank you for your invitation. And I'm going to explain a little about our experience in our organization. Our organization is a public entity in north of Spain. Spain is kind of some like Italy kind of mess in the healthcare system. Each region has their own competences, and we gather different healthcare organizations and also municipalities. And part of our activities is to act as a central procurement body. We procure around 1.2 billion euros in medicines and medical devices. And well, mostly 60% of medicines, 30% medical devices. Medicines are made around the 25% of the healthcare cost in Spain. So mostly we are focused on medicines, but also medical devices. And some preliminary reflections, because as procurers or as from the tendering as that we are performing, we can act as a leverage for being more sustainable. But first of all, we have to select the products we want to buy. It's not as easy as, well, I want to procure more benefitly, but which some of these decisions, they have strong implications in the healthcare assistance we perform. So HTA, the healthcare technology assessment of the new drugs or the current drugs, may have an important role when we are going to procure or going to planificate our tenders. And also we have to assess the implications of changing some of the products, changing some of the medicines, and also the protocols we are using in our hospitals. Some criteria, environmental criteria, has not been used during the whole history in the assessing drugs or medical devices, but now some methodologies like multi-criteria decision analysis incorporate other dimensions in the performance of the assessment of the new drugs, and some of them are related to environmental impact, like the impact on future generations that medicines or medical devices have when we are incorporating them in practice. Well, one example is this is the national assessment of a new drug, tepotinib for cancer, lung cancer, and one of the conclusions in the discussion is that this new drug has this toxic or persistent and toxic profile with the environment. So it's going to be difficult to eliminate for the environment. So we will find it in the environment for many years. So these kind of considerations are important at the moment we select the drugs, but well, they have a balance of risk-benefit for the regulatory agencies. But maybe we at the moment we are going to introduce it in practice, we can have this consideration as we want to avoid use it or restrict it for the patients that can benefit the most. And other drugs like anesthetic gases, Desflurane has also been mentioned, or inhalers with propellants, and for medical devices, for example, the use of recyclable clothing. Some of these considerations are already present in the regulatory agencies appraisal. The EPR and the European Medicines Agency incorporate this environmental assessment, but from the national perspective and from the hospital perspective, our Pharmacy and Therapeutics Committee has not been introduced during many years. And now we are going to introduce it. We are introducing it, but I have to admit that it's part of the consideration, it's part of the assessment, and well, the benefit for patients, the incremental benefits, survival, comfortability, and also curation at this moment is the main driver for the decision. But at least I have to admit that we are incorporating these other considerations related to the environment of the risk that the introduction of these new drugs will have in the clinical practice. And this is another example of our reflections when we are going to change procedures at hospitals and how procurement as a leverage is working. In Spain, with medicines, with oral medicines, we always try to get what we call unit dose. Those drugs that are delivered for one moment for the patient, so the complete dose for the patient. And to have a high traceability of this drug, we ask to manufacturers that each dose will have all the information, like the active ingredient, expiry, the batch, and also the data matrix, which means that this unit dose will be larger because we have to introduce some images in this blister. When we don't have unit dose, we repackage, repack all these the rest of medications to get this unit dose to our hospital procurement and to provide the patients with this unit dose for everything. But what we have seen now is that we did not realize that we are procuring some of these unit dose for outpatients. So maybe they don't really need all this increase in the use of aluminum and plastics. So we were focused in the traceability, in the safety with the way we use the medicines, but now we are trying to differentiate in our procurement how we are working. But the repackaging has a height wasted in plastics, and because we introduce all these plastics with the repackaging, and procuring unit dose has less impact that compared with repackaging. But procuring not unit dose in a bottle of pills has less impact. So we have to personalize at this moment because we consider safety at this moment in hospitals is our highest concern. We do not want to cause harm because safety issues. So with inpatients, we are focused with unit dose, so avoid repackaging. But for outpatients, we are reconsidering our previous decisions to less impact ways of delivery. Our experience in the consortium, and as we are a multi-central procurement body, and we work with several these 58 hospitals, for us it's a bit more difficult to introduce some of these changes because we have to get some consensus with hospitals. And but with the introduction of the European directive on procurement, public procurement, we started to introduce these social and environmental clauses. And to introduce these social and environmental clauses, that also mean that we are getting the commitment of our institution and also the hospitals, because we have to admit that some of the decisions when we are introducing some of these criteria in the procurement, maybe we will have to pay more for some drugs than compared to others. And in a healthcare system that we have constraints, and we always say to the politicians, we need more money for our healthcare system. We have to argue and show that we have a commitment with the environment, but to say that we are going to pay more for some of these decisions, for some of these treatments, because we are committed with the environment and the social aspects of the procurement. This is our experience in the environmental criteria. As I said, we differentiate the explicit criteria and non-explicit criteria. For example, unit dose for us will be a non-explicit criteria. It has an environmental component because we avoid repackaging, but our focus or the intended use of the criteria is the safety. not the environmental criteria. We started in 2018 in medical devices. As you see, in 2020, during the COVID, we focused in getting the supplies. We had the problems with shortages. We still have shortages, but at that moment, our focus was with COVID. But in 2021, we restarted introducing this criteria, and we observed that, well, at least 60% of the bids, so the manufacturers, they provided information or they fulfill the criteria we introduced. So I think we are quite aligned with the manufacturers, and they say that, well, the procurement is a leverage, so they have to work in this line. Our objective is for next year to have 100% of the tenders to have an explicit criteria, and this year we are at 80%, so we are in the transition. And also the weight, as I comment, the weight means the value or the money we are willing to pay more for more environmental solution. So compared with the other solution or the other bid that has not do not fulfills these environmental criteria. Well, with healthcare systems with high environmental constraints, we started also with 1%. It's an average, and this year is 2% as an average. So some of the tenders, they have a 10%, others has a 1%. And our objective or goal for next year is to have an average of 5% on explicit criteria. So when we are doing some calculations, maybe it's higher because some of the criteria that we already introduced has also an environmental component, but this is only for environmental criteria. And which kind of criteria we are introducing? Well, we are focusing in all the domains of the drugs and the medical devices, the products, the design, the products, the impact on the patients, also in sustainability in the way the manufacturer is producing, the supply chain. In some tenders, we introduced that to use electric vehicles for the delivery of the drugs, and also other dimensions that are more holistic, like the corporate responsibility of the company. These are some examples that we have already introduced in our tenders, like recyclable devices or packaging, like in injectors or sub-injectors. Some are done by plastic, but some manufacturers, they provide that you can separate and recycle these plastics, and others are almost impossible to reuse it. And also, for example, the fluids, which cause a lot of plastics in the hospital. Some of them are recyclable and others not. The use of some substances with lower environmental impact, especially in devices, but also in the manufacturing. Drugs are manufactured, mostly of them with the same plants, but you can have different synthesis procedures to get to the same product, active ingredient. So some of them are more material responsible than others. The use of energy with the production of the products. And I would want to emphasize the last one, the data on the carbon footprint. In some products, it's almost impossible to calculate it, because even the manufacturers do not know where the active ingredient comes from. So introducing this criteria is a leverage for them to ask to their suppliers how it's produced and which is the carbon footprint of the initial products and all the process to get the final product from the synthesis that in many of the cases are produced in Asiatic countries, and they do not have a direct relation with the manufacturer that is in Europe. But if we ask them to provide this data, well, maybe we will not do nothing at the beginning, but we will have the information to act in a second step and to decide and to take decisions to which are more environmental responsible than others. Other we have in consideration because it's difficult to assess the green chemistry practices in the development of the new drugs and also the animal welfare in the clinical trials. It's also a proposal of the European Commission to work on this topic. And this is my final slide. Well, we have worked with the suppliers, with the manufacturers, to have a lot of dialogue with them, because we see that many of the pharmaceutical companies are aligned to be more sustainable. Some of these intentions are more greenwashing than others. I have to admit that. Certifications allow us to procure within a more robust way, because we don't have to assess all this data and the impact. And so if a third entity can certify, it's easy. But most of the certifications are also greenwashing. They do not serve for us. The value. Well, the value means the commitment of the institutions, how much we are willing to pay to have an environmental product compared with the rest. The innovation, because some products are some innovations can be introduced into the market, but we are not procuring them, but could be an option for us. For example, for anesthetic gases, there are some devices that capture the drug, the anesthetic gas, and some they are discarded because the capture of the anesthetic gas is intended to avoid the exposure for the healthcare workers, because it can be toxic in a long-term exposition. But others, you can reuse this anesthetic drug. So apart from avoiding this exposure to the worker, the healthcare workers, you can reuse, you can have the drug again, because it can be recovered from this capture device. So the introduction of this new technology, or these innovative products, can also help us to deal with the problems or our goals, reducing the anesthetic gases or reducing the impact of the anesthetic gases in the environment. Collaborative projects also with the companies, because when we start with dialogue, they say, well, medicines are highly regulated, so it's not easy to change a product for us, because we last sometimes years to change the manufacturing process of a drug. So we want your commitment that you are really wanting this, and in 2 years you are not going to ask another thing. And another goal is, well, big buyers like settled procurement bodies, we have to share all these intentions with them, because most of the manufacturers, they have plans for the whole Europe. So they are not going to change the manufacturing process or a product only for a hospital. They are going to change it if central procurement bodies are going to ask for it. And this adoption of innovation can contribute to the environmental sustainability, and we have to work with that, because it's also incorporating innovation. That means incorporation a cost, but it can have a saving, but a long term. Thank you.
So many thanks to both our speakers. Francesco, can you come? I will take one question each, because otherwise I will have to shorten your coffee break further. But you can ask more questions during the coffee break. I see one question here. The man with the recent. Thank you, Dara, for getting the mic there. There you go.
Yeah, I have a question for Francesco. I was born in Budapest and raised in Belgium. So I was wondering if you have also greenhouse emissions, big public data from Central and Eastern Europe, like Poland, Hungary, Serbia, etc. And do you work with them or not?
Does it work? Okay.
Yes.
No, the only data that we were able to find are the ones that we presented. So actually, mine is a sort of a call to try to make this data more available. I'm now trying to contact different researchers, especially, for example, in the drug use research field, to see if they have access to this data, but I haven't found any other data in addition to the ones that I presented. So any input on this side would be very, very welcome.
Thank you. A question for Josep. I see here in the middle of the room, man with gray jacket. Oh, it's also for Francesco. Okay, go ahead. And then
Hello, I'm Hans Emil. I come from Danish healthcare and work with anesthetic gases there. In our case, the use of nitrous oxide is actually on a climate level by a factor of 20 more. There are more emissions, 20 times more. Do you have any recommendations? I know you mentioned nitrous oxides in the beginning. Do you have any recommendations on this use of that gas?
Thank you for the question, because this is a very important topic. I didn't talk at all about this nitrous oxide, but in fact, we have even less data on these other countries, for different countries. But from what we have seen in Italy, in fact, the nitrous oxide is really account for the most part of the emission. So in Italy, it would be about 70%. In Ireland, it would be 70% of the total as well. And I suspect that in England is something similar, even if I did just an indirect calculation. So this is a very important point. The causes are the sources of these emissions are, or at least the intervention to be made are different. Because, for example, in Italy, one of the problems is that most of the nitrous oxide is centralized at the level of the hospital. So basically the anesthesiologists just open like the tap and they use it, and they don't even know how much they are using it, because they just open the tap and they use it. So it's very important, and there is a lot of leakages in these centralized systems, at least in Italy, but I suspect also in other countries. So I think these are two very important interventions that, at least in the literature, are proposed to try to reduce this the emission related to this gas. Yeah. Thank you.
is it for who is this question? Okay, and the other one. Okay, so let's go for one with Joseph first. Yeah. So we can balance a bit the two topics.
Hello, Annika Eberstein, I work for Philips. Obviously, we are not a pharmaceutical manufacturer, but I saw that you also address medical devices, so I hope that's okay. I had a question, what method you use or how you determine the weighting of the environmental criteria, because certainly for our type of equipment, we see a very wide range there from purchasers. So yeah, I would like to understand how you decide on that.
We have a consensus with the clinicians with this which kind of products we want, and then the weighting related with this clinical focus, and also the value we give to some of the criteria. For example, in the environmental criteria, if we are committed that we are going to use a different product, for example, a reusable product, we are going to provide more criteria to that because we intend to procure that. But we calculate the real value of it or the expected value with different suppliers. Having this previous dialogue and also the knowledge of the market, we more or less we know which are the products and which is going to be the efforts of the different manufacturers.
Okay, we have one at the end of the room for Francesco, and then last Maria will be for Joseph. Okay. Oh, okay, both. Okay, let's go ahead, and then I have to close it here, otherwise you won't have access to cafe, no?
Yeah. Yeah, sorry for the mix-up in the names. I'm Vincent Mellis. I work here for the Belgium government at the administration level. I had a question about the procurement, and I see that now you're achieving 80% of greener procurement, and you're targeting 100% for the years to come. Can you measure the impact of that on the carbon footprint, first of all? Because what is the impact of a greener procurement concretely for the hospital? Say I go to green procurement, how is my balance better or not? Because that's an interesting, it's interesting to see that green procurement, but what's the impact? And is it a vision to have in the future also not only carbon footprint, but also environmental footprint?
For the first question, well, that's going to be my homework for next year. No, we haven't calculated it, but I think we should calculate it now that we have more data and we are more committed with that. And yes, the carbon footprint, I think that at this moment seems that it's the easiest or the most available information that all the manufacturers have. And also maybe the most easy to interpret it, to have the interpretation for us. But we are seeking the next years to change it to the environmental footprint.
Okay, thank you. Last question from Maria, in the front.
I was just wondering, one of the challenges we see in all this field is that the supply companies are global and we are local. So when we ask them to make an LCA on a pharmaceutical product or whatever, it's really not an investment that's positive for them. So how, somewhere in the strategy, do you see the international cooperation, and how do you work into that field of area? Or do you just try to make a difference on your own, demanding stuff on your own? And do they listen? Because then I would like to know what you're doing.
Well, that's an important thing because we have to admit that the healthcare sector is global. So I think in Spain, maybe we are pioneers because we have published, we have started with this introducing in all the tenders, but we are working with the other entities, the rest of Spain, and also with entities like Healthcare Without Harm, also the Big Buyers initiative of the European Commission that we are members of. I'm also a member of the European Association of Hospital Pharmacy Sustainability Group. So I think we are working in different parts of Europe, but we must get together to have a consensus and also to focus in our objectives. If not, it's very difficult to convince the manufacturer, especially the pharmaceutical companies that are global, to change in their manufacturing processes and in their products.
Thank you so much to both our speakers. So we've come to the end of the first part of the morning. I hope you are now very motivated to have more usable products and more circular models in your hospitals, as well as increasing the data collection for anesthetic gases. You've seen there is a big gap there, something also for Healthcare Without Harm Europe to look at. And and yeah, implement sustainable procurement, creating this collective demand, right, for more sustainable products. So we'll have a quick coffee break, just 10-15 minutes. So you'll have to go in the next room. So just please grab a coffee and then come back. And the next session will be about healing environments, sustainable and resilient hospital buildings. Thank you.